Public forum. There was one submission which Mr. Ayub, it was circulated? Yeah. All right, already circulated to the councillors. Councillor Lake, you had the call on the youth strategy.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I did put a motion to Ms. Karaki. Hopefully she's got it. There it is.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I will second it.
Do you want to speak on it, Councillor Lake?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. If everyone's had a chance to read it. Before I commence speaking, Mr. Mayor, I do have a question I would like to ask whoever's representing the youth strategy tonight, if that's possible, through you to the General Manager.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Councillor Lake, I believe we have Director Melissa Addy online tonight. I think we also actually have Miss Victoria Frangi online and also Miss Kathy Zammit online too as well. So you can take your pick,
okay.
Councillor Lake.
Look, it's very simple. I just want to know how many youth workers we currently employ.
I'll, through you, Mr. Mayor, I'll pass that one through to Melissa Addy for a response.
Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if I can get Victoria to comment on that, what I would ask Councillor Lake potentially is when you say youth workers, that team is split into the youth team, the recreation team. There are other resources within that working on, broader child protection issues. So, Victoria, if you can give an outline of exactly the number of resources in each of those areas, please.
Absolutely. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Currently, the youth development team has one coordinator and 3 officer positions, and as Melissa mentioned, one of those is dedicated to health and wellbeing initiatives, so recreation included.
Thanks, Victoria. Can you just tell me, are the officer positions filled at the moment?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we have 2 vacant officer positions.
So at the moment we've just got 2 full-time employees in that area.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct.
Thanks. And just finally, do you know how many youth workers we had employed when the strategy was first implemented in about 2018?
Through you, Mr.
A bit difficult, I know.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I don't have the exact number, however, it was more than the current youth development team.
Thank you. I'll start what I want to say now. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, councillors, when we set this year's budget at our council meeting in June, I proposed an increase in the youth development budget to assist us to implement this strategy. I'd felt for some time, and I said at the time, that this strategy was under-resourced and that its goals were therefore being hampered and ultimately were incapable of being realised. The progress report on the strategy that was delivered to us back in 2019, halfway through its implementation, showed us that many of the actions in the strategy had been delivered, but only as one-off events and in fairly limited geographical areas. And I said that the strategy needed better resourcing and a significant boost, particularly to the priority of youth employment. I was not successful at that June meeting in gaining majority support for my proposal. In fact, I recall being roundly criticised by Councillor Garrard, who said that my request for additional funds for the work was nothing more than a political stunt. Well, now we have the evaluation report and the evidence is in. The feedback on the implementation of this youth strategy, which was the winner of New South Wales awards, and also I understand an international award, was that it did not give enough focus to marginalised or harder to reach young people, and that priority one of the strategy relating to employment failed to execute one of its key actions, which was to establish and operate an employment pathways program for young people. The reason for that is certainly not any failure of Council's youth development team. As you can see tonight, there's 2 people working in that team. I'm in awe of what they've managed to achieve with such a limited budget. Rather, it is, as politely referred to in the report, a number of changes around capacity and resources, and a disconnection between the strategy and Council's overall priorities and objectives. In the 2016 census, 12.5% of Cumberland's residents aged 15 to 24 were disengaged. That is, they were not employed and they were not studying. Our response to that, well, if you read the report, in late 2019, we ceased running youth drop-in service. So, you know, when I look at that and think with that level of disengagement, why would we do such a thing? The data around youth unemployment in Cumberland was bad before COVID, and it's quite devastating now. We've got in the report, July 2021, unemployment rate for young people, Parramatta, Cumberland, between the ages of 15 and 24 was 16.2%. And in Greater Sydney, it's only 12.5%. When I say only, it's still significant, but 16 is far worse. If we don't take some action to turn this position around, then in my view, we failed in one of the most basic of government responsibilities, which was to secure some sort of future for our young people. This pandemic, in its second wave, has highlighted something really important about Council's role. It's that particularly in an area like Cumberland, our community's needs for local support extends far beyond providing footpaths, clean town centres and efficient waste disposal. It's time, councillors, that we looked and recognised that there's some other basics that need our urgent attention. So I ask you to support the motion to give further resources to the implementation and ongoing implementation of this strategy. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lake. Councillor Saha, did you want to speak in it as a seconder?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor and councillors, youth unemployment is a major concern for Cumberland City, which has also been acknowledged in the Cumberland Youth Strategy Evaluation Report. And one of the prime focus of the strategy is to support young people to find and gain employment. A significant milestone in our youth strategy is to establish and execute an employment pathway program for young people so that they can find and gain employment. And Council was unable to establish an employment pathway program. It has been noted in the evaluation report, Mr. Mayor. It's known to everyone how the pandemic drove job creation off a cliff, especially in Western Sydney. As per a report in Sydney Morning Herald on 6th of September, new online employment posting in parts of cities west and southwest plunged more than 60%. The biggest decline was in the West and Blue Mountains, down 61%. The article further mentions about Tamara Javran, a 23 years old who lives at Maryland and has been job searching non-stop for 2 months. She's been doing whatever she can, like sending applications, going to recruitment agencies. And everyone is saying there is nothing in Western Sydney now. She was working for a state government, but her contract ended sometime this year. She fears the scarcity of job openings means she will not be rehired. Mr. Mayor, this is just one example. And we know there are many people in the same situation. As a leader of the Cumberland community, we must extend our helping hands for our youth. Furthermore, Mr. Mayor and councillors, the clubs of manufacturing, retail, and clerical jobs in Western Sydney significantly lowered the availability of local entry-level jobs for young people. Young people in Western Sydney are more likely to find casual and part-time jobs that requires low skill sets and offer little security. But now, due to job losses across the whole population, youth are likely to be competing for the same uncertain positions with older Australians who have also lost their job. This adds extra difficulties for our youth to get back to the workforce. Councillor Lake mentioned about the unemployment rate. Compared to the general unemployment rate in New South Wales, which is about 4.5% now, the youth unemployment is actually tripled in Sydney and Parramatta region at 16.2. Not only youth unemployment and underemployment represent an underutilization of the labor force and wasted opportunity for entire generation of young people to experience secure, meaningful work, which has been evidenced since the global financial crisis and now has been further intensified by COVID-19 pandemic. Mr. Mayor and councillors, considering the strategic action to establish an employment pathway program for local young people was not achieved, and how critical it is for the future of Cumberland City, I urge all of you to support the youth of Cumberland City and support our motion. Thank you.
All right. Councillor Garrard, were you moving something? Were you moving an amendment?
I'm moving the adoption of the report.
All right.
No,
That's a new record. That's not the report. That's Councillor Lake's recommendations. All right. So Councillor Garrard's moved the adoption of the report. Well, it's not an amendment. Councillor Lake is it? Okay.
It is an amendment.
Are you seconding that, Councillor Sarkis? Yeah. That's seconded, Councillor Sarkis. Are you speaking on it, Councillor Garrard?
not at this point.
Councillor Sarkis, are you speaking on it?
Yeah, I think the report speaks for itself. If you go through it, I see what Councillor Lake's trying to do, but I think the report is sufficient in the way.
I've got Councillor Zeta, followed by Councillor Elmore.
Mr. Mayor, look, I've just got a few questions to the relevant council officer. We've got a particular strategy and we have a current budget in place. Do they believe that the current budget that is in place is sufficient to satisfy the strategy? That's my first question. Secondly, point 5 of the motion that's currently before us, that was put forward by Councillor Lake, is requesting an additional $316,000. And it's identifying, or it's stating that the additional $300,000+ should be obtained from a number of business areas within our council, such as the communications budget or the information systems budget and so on. Is it a requirement that we actually specifically state what we want to reduce in order to reallocate those funds against a particular motion, or is it okay for us to simply, say, I want $300,000, find it in the budget for me? I thought we had to specifically state that this is where the money's coming from, not simply just generalise and say we want it from this particular area. Can I just get some clarity in that respect, please?
Mr. Fitzgerald.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Councillor Zeta, if I may, I'll answer your second question first. Yes, generally speaking, we do ask for. It has been practice in the past to request a location or an area from where the money can be funded from. The answer to your first question, Councillor, is that the staff The general staff are unable to answer that question, but I can answer that question, and that is that the budget has been adopted by council and it's been set by council. We spend the money according to the budget. Any other ancillary commentary to that would be something that would be subject to a briefing in the future. We couldn't provide that advice to you formally tonight.
So are you saying for me that we have a strategy in place and you can't advise me as to whether we have sufficient funding to meet the strategy goals?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Councillor, I didn't. I must have interpreted your question properly.
Okay, so that was my first question was this. The current budget is $684,000. Councillor Lake is advising us via her motion that is not sufficient to meet the strategy goals that are set out up to 2021. In the actual strategy just before us. I'm asking the relevant staff officer, either yourself or whoever looks after this particular area, to advise me as to whether the $684,000 that's currently in play is sufficient to satisfy the goals for the current financial year in respect to the strategy. That's my first question. So if I'll get an answer to that, I'll talk to you about. I'll discuss the other question I've got.
Sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor. Sorry, Councillor, I interpreted your question to be something different altogether. I thought you were asking advice from the staff in the area of concern. Mr. Mayor, I'll refer that question to Director Melissa Adia.
Director Atia.
Sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I think at present the budget is sufficient if the positions that we have that are currently vacant were able to be filled. We would have the relevant resourcing to be able to do that. I do note, however, that in the youth strategy, the actions that are in place specifically with respect to employment for young people are about working in partnership with service providers and undertaking a lot of advocacy work and seeking partnerships or other funding or initiatives to develop employment pathways for young people, but also to remove barriers. Now, a lot of that work, I will say, has been hindered by the current pandemic. That's not to say that the budget isn't sufficient to deliver on the strategy. Councillor Lake did mention previously, there's mention in the youth strategy about certain elements of the strategy, and Councillor Lake did touch on the drop-in centre. The drop-in centre, council senior staff made a decision some time ago under the previous general manager. You may recall that we didn't have the budget to be both in the advocacy work and the direct service delivery work. And the youth drop-in centres were part of that direct service delivery work that we've said we can't do that if we're going to do these other things. Now, that was obviously prior to COVID and the pandemic. Now, we've kind of taken, for want of a better term, a hit both ways, in the sense that the pandemic's hit, so we haven't been able to do a lot of the work we want to do in terms of the youth strategy and on the employment side of things, and working with the relevant stakeholders to develop that. But I have, as recently as last week, received a proposal from the youth team to put in place at council the very first step in starting to engage with the sector about this, and that was about a whole range of school-based apprenticeships and traineeships where council effectively would become an employer of young people in the area and set the tone for what we want to start to do more broadly within our LGA for that. And that's certainly very affordable for council to do and quite easy to do once restrictions are lifted and we can start doing those things and bringing people into workplaces. A lot of the work has been delayed, I wouldn't say necessarily due to funding, but because of physical barriers of being able to go out and do what we have to do. We've talked about job expos and bringing in local employers and doing all of those sorts of things. And those things can certainly be achieved within this budget. But the ability to do that has been hampered by the lack of physical ability to hold those events and do some of that work. And I'm happy if Ms. Frangi would like to add anything further to that. If you think, Victoria, that there's room for further dialogue on that.
I think we're good, Director Atia. We'll move on.
So Director Atia, so basically what you're saying is that the current budget is sufficient to achieve the strategy goals. And from what I heard, potentially you've got some empty employment positions within that particular division that if you were able to fill those positions, you'd actually be able to maybe do a bit more. But at the moment, that $684,000 that's in place is sufficient based on your understanding to achieve the goals. And it's not the money that's stopping you from doing that. It's actually just the COVID situation.
Through you, Mr Mayor, that's correct, Councillor Zeta. Those positions have been held vacant because the positions are required to deliver the work that we're talking about, but in the current climate, I can't progress that work, so it would be futile to employ people to do work we physically can't do at this stage, because we can't meet with people and have, you know, apprentices and trainees and that kind of thing come to council buildings to start those programs.
So potentially increasing your budget to $1 million is not going to really achieve anything for the time being, on the basis that, yes, you're going to have extra money, but what are you going to spend it on if you can't really actually get the people out there to do what you need to do?
At this point in time, Councillor Zeta, I would say that that's probably premature. That's not to say that at a point in the future, the program and the service may need further investment, and I'm certainly not saying that it won't at any point in the future, but right now, if council were to resolve to increase my budget by that amount of money, I couldn't spend it anyway because we can't physically do the work.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any other questions, Councillor Elmore? Followed by Councillor
Thank you,
Simon.
Mr Mayor. Director Addy has spoke about most of the things that I wanted to talk about, and well, to begin with, I'm against the amendment. I think council needs to do a little bit, needs to do more on reducing youth unemployment, young adult unemployment. We need to find pathways for these people. As we know, this has been happening in Western Sydney for 20 years or so, and the people around where we live don't get the same opportunities as people from the eastern side of Sydney. We need to get these people job ready. We need to train them. These days, employers, they don't seem to want to train anybody now. They want somebody that can walk straight in. The people come from our area, as Councillor Saha said, that they can't really work from home. They haven't got the skill set of other people, of other applicants, and we really need to step up. And I think we've got the responsibility, and to help them. If we do promote jobs for young adults, that's better for our economy too. And if we can get them good jobs, I think that council's got a responsibility to do that. And if we can work a little bit harder in that area, and if we need to spend a little bit more money, I think we should. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
All right, we've got Councillor. The General Manager had an answer. All right, Councillor Saha, followed by Councillor Garrard.
Oh, Mr. Mayor, thank you. I just have a question. I have spoken on this matter. So my understanding is that the youth strategy ran until 2021, and this is the evaluation report that we have in front of us. So if we don't take any action, for example, what I have spoken for about 4 minutes, that we should invest more in youth employment pathway program. My question through you to the appropriate council officer, Mr. Mayor, if we just receive and note this evaluation report for Cumberland Youth Strategy 2017-2021, does that mean that we're not going to take any further action, or there will be a follow-on action items like, that council will identify the strategies that has not been delivered, like pathway programs, and there will be further actions taken?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Councillor Saha, refer that to Melissa Radio.
Mr. Mayor, look, Councillor Saha, I didn't interpret it that way. There are a number of outstanding actions in the youth strategy, and typically when we do have outstanding actions in any strategy, they would be considered in the development and in the next iteration of the strategy. And I'm working on the assumption with my team, certainly, that any of those outstanding ones would be carried over, and to the extent that the proposals I have received for what the work on the youth employment pathways looks like moving forward, I'm still considering for inclusion in that. Well, not considering, I'm assuming that they're going to carry over into the next iteration of the strategy when the youth team moves under the community team, and that way we get a broader perspective about it. We're also talking quite closely to the Environment and Planning Directorate about their employment pathways more broadly and attracting economy to the region, and because obviously it's all well and good to prepare young people for jobs, but if those jobs aren't there for them to go to, and I'm I know that's a very basic principle, but attracting investment to the area and getting the jobs where the young people have to marry up, and essentially that's now where we're looking at taking the next iteration of the strategy.
Noted with thanks, Mel. Thank you. What I hear from you that there will be a follow-up strategy.
Certainly, and yeah, with the structure, council would remember that we, with what's happening with education and care services and the youth team and the advocacy are moving under the community area of my directorate. That's going to put all of the community services probably a lot more tightly together in the advocacy sense, certainly. And I think those linkages between what we're doing and what Director Cavallo's area is doing in terms of the employment opportunities versus preparing the young people to take those employment opportunities, that's all got to work hand in hand. That's how the next iteration of the strategy is certainly the perspective that my team and I are looking at it from.
May I ask a question?
Well, Councillor Garrard was next. Councillor Garrard.
Okay.
Mr Mayor, look, in moving the amendment, let me say that what I see before us, this motion, is a typical political stunt that you could only expect from the Labor Party.
Sorry, Mr Mayor, point of order. Is Councillor Garrard speaking again?
Councillor Garrard did not speak at all, Councillor Huang.
When he moved his amendment, he did not speak?
Councillor Huang, if you actually paid attention, he did not speak. He said he will speak later.
Okay, sure.
I've been watching you up there, Councillor Huang.
Okay, keep watching then.
If the councillor was playing less on his mobile and listening to what happens at the meeting, you would know that I never spoke. But I do know this is a stunt because there's an election coming up. Look, I would rather congratulate the staff for their success in bringing this report, in implementing a strategy across Cumberland. We should be celebrating the success of that strategy, Mr Mayor, over the last 4 years. I mean, we can listen to some of the comments here tonight, but to my recollection, I can't remember seeing a resolution asking for an update on the youth strategy between 2017 and 2021.
Yes.
We can argue that this didn't happen and that didn't happen and something should have happened quicker, but there's no resolution on the books that asks for a continual update on the youth strategy. Oh no, the only time we're going to raise it is 2 months before an election. And what we're going to do, we'll just throw money at it, throw $300,000 extra at it and hope that it hits the spot. Well, when you look at this particular report, one can only be impressed by the comments that have been made. And if I just find this report now, where's it, page 69, I think, is it? Page 69. It highlights a whole stack of issues which have been nothing more than a success story for this organisation and for the youth strategy that's been implemented. I might add the report goes into some depth into the various strategies that were implemented by the organisation as well. I mean, I'm very, very impressed that indeed 9%, 94 young people have been employed in this organisation. I'm equally impressed that surveys have highlighted that in our recent satisfaction survey, which we had a workshop on only the other night, and there was no mention made of this, 89% of of people that commented, 89% thought that that was an excellent score in terms of the satisfaction of the implementation of the policy. In fact, 6% higher than the Metro benchmark. It further highlighted the fact that during the school holidays we involved 741 young people in various participations across the city. Our Healthy Kids initiative, again, 878 young people were involved. Now, in the end, and I might add, the opening remarks in this report indicate that 52 out of 58 actions were actually completed. Now, we've gone through hard times over the last 2 years, and it's been very difficult to complete anything, quite frankly, to the theoretical satisfactions of a strategy. But in terms of what we've done, I think it's an excellent outcome. Sure, there are areas around employment that can only get better. Employment is a problem. It does involve economic strategies, it does involve economic outcomes, and it does involve economic development. And this council, those areas are only new to this council. It takes councils years to develop the appropriate strategies in order to get the outcomes and the pathways required for young people. But we're working towards that, and I'm very impressed that we have got as far as we have, Mr Mayor. I think this report is an excellent one at this point in time. I look forward to the further reports that are going to highlight just where we can improve in terms of completing those areas of the strategies that haven't been completed.
Councillor, you done, Councillor Garrard? Thank you, Councillor Garrard. Is there any other speakers? No other speakers? All right, we'll put the amendment and we'll go straight to the hands. Won't even bother. All those.
Well, I'd like to speak in reply.
That's correct, Councillor Lake. Please do.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Garrard, for once again trying to insult other councillors who are trying to make some serious submissions in the debate in this chamber. It's a sad indictment that when you don't have much to say, you tend to become quite personal. I feel quite concerned about your comments that at no time did we ask for this strategy, for an update on the implementation of this strategy, because back in 2019 there was quite a comprehensive and extensive midway report presented to councillors on the progress of the implementation of the strategy. And if I can take you to that report, Councillor Garrard, you might see there that that there were a number of actions that were unable to be implemented by 2019 that they had highlighted as important current priorities for the remaining term of the strategy. And two of those priorities were implementation of Council's new Youth Employment Pathways program, which they say will increase opportunities and recruitment practices within Council that are supportive of young people, and the development of a youth hub model of service delivery for youth. So that's what we were told, and you were there, Councillor Garrard. That's what we were told in 2019 was to occur between 2019 and 2021.
Councillor Garrard.
Point of order, Mr Mayor. I think I'm being misrepresented on this matter. I said that there was no report brought forward by various councillors. The people who brought that report forward were the council officers.
I say, Joe.
Keep going, Councillor Lake.
I don't bring reports to council, Councillor Garrard. I comment on reports that are given to us by the officers. And in fact, you know, there was quite an extensive one given to us at a meeting in 2019, and I do recall making comments about it. The strategy is now complete. It was a 4-year strategy and it's now finished, and we have an evaluation, and the evaluation has quite clearly told us that that they were unable to meet some of their objectives. And it specifically states in the evaluation that the reason for not meeting the objectives was as a result of changes to capacity and resources. It's there in black and white. The strategy was a twofold strategy in relation to employment. One of the strategies was to work in partnership with others, and I can see that that has to a certain extent been achieved. But the other part of the strategy, very important part, was to progress an employment pathways program within council, and that has not occurred. Now, if you do nothing else but support this amendment tonight, then the youth strategy and the employment pathways program within it is no longer before us as part of a strategy. There has to be either an extension of this youth strategy or the development of a new youth strategy where we have to wait and provide resources for the new youth strategy to be drafted. My motion simply says there's no need to progress a new youth strategy. We haven't finished the one that we've got. Let's just extend it and get on with it. Now, if anybody doesn't think that that's a sensible course, if anybody thinks that we should now sit back for 12 months while another youth strategy is developed and find the resources to do that whilst we're doing everything else that we're trying to achieve, then I feel very sad that that's the way this council wants to operate.
Are you done, Councillor?
No, I haven't finished. I feel also that the excuse for us not taking action on this strategy, being that we're in the middle of a pandemic, is only a very short period that we've been in the middle of a lockdown pandemic, and that will soon end. And when that ends, we will be out and about as we always have been, and this youth strategy and its implementation can progress. So I am asking in this motion that we continue on with the youth strategy that we haven't completed, that we find an extra $300,000 in our budget to fund some additional resources to allow the capacity and resources behind this strategy to progress, and that we show that we have a commitment to the young people of Cumberland, as I think we do.
Extension of time, councillors.
I think we just need some focus.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Councillor
Mr. Mayor.
All right, with councillors with the right of reply out of the way, we'll go straight to the voting of the amendment. We'll do it by a show of hands. All those in favour of the amendment of Councillor Garrard and Councillor Sarkis, please raise your hands. Councillor Garrard, Councillor Atty, Councillor Cummings, Councillor Sarkis, Councillor Christo, Councillor Rami, Councillor Zraker and Councillor Zeta. All those against? Councillor Elmore, Councillor Lake, Councillor Campbell, Councillor Huang, Councillor Hamid and Councillor Saha. The amendment is carried. Thank you. The amendment now becomes a motion. Again to the hands. All those in favour of the motion, can you please raise your hands? Councillor Rami, Councillor Zraker, Councillor Zeta, Councillor Garrard, Councillor Atty, Councillor Cummings, Councillor Sarkis and Councillor Christo. All those against? Councillor Elmore, Councillor Lake, Councillor Campbell, Councillor Huang, Councillor Hamid and Councillor Saha. The motion's carried.